The most complicated aspect is maybe not the scientific aspect, the physics side. It's the finance, it's the politics, it's the societies, it's the values that are all important and maybe more important than the physical aspect.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Earth Circle. If you're joining us for the first time, we've posed the question, is there a version of the future that we all want to live in? Or are we all going to have to put up with some terrible bad compromise? And it seems like that is the topic that our generation is obsessed with debating around. And we've got all different opinions on the spectrum, from some people that are claiming that climate change is a lie and isn't really happening, to other people who are proving that it is true. So to kick off this season, we've gone right to the source and we've met with one of the most renowned climate scientists on the planet, a guy called Professor Reto Knutti, and he took a lot of time for us in his office at the ETH in Zurich. That's one of the most renowned universities in the world where Reto has been researching for the last 17 years. It's a really interesting building and some very famous people studied there. We'll talk about one very famous person at the start of this interview. Now, what we're going to be doing is we've chopped that interview up into bite-sized podcasts so you can dip in and out of the subjects that are most interesting to you. And we're going to be sharing those with you over the next few weeks. So please do subscribe on YouTube if you want to have those podcasts in your feed. And otherwise, if you're a little bit impatient like me, go to patreon.com where you can actually find all of the podcasts. If you search for the Earth Circle on patreon.com, all of those podcasts are waiting for you there already today. Okay, so in this first episode of our interview with Professor Reto Knutti, we're going to be talking about the wicked problem of climate change. What is a wicked problem and why does he describe climate change as being one? We'll also talk about the connection between fossil fuels and economic growth and whether we can break through that connection in the future without all the countries around the world going bankrupt and all the finance people getting upset about having less money. We'll then also talk about the disconnect between the cause and effect of climate change, the distance problem, what I do somewhere and how that affects somebody else. And we'll talk about the benefits of a more sustainable world. What I love about Reto Knutti is he has practical solutions and he has suggestions about what we can do. He doesn't just point fingers and do the blame game. It's really, really rewarding listening to him. Do hope you enjoy this podcast. Reto Knutti, thank you so much for taking the time for us today. We're here at the ETH, the ETH in Zurich, one of the most renowned unis in the world. Actually, I'm probably going to mess up now, but isn't this where Einstein also studied for a while?
I think a number of people or universities claim the name Einstein. He spent some time in Bern, he spent some time at the university and at ETH.
Okay.
But yes, we are famous with his locker in the main building over there.
All right. Well, I mean, that's two things we've got in common because I know that you also spent some time in Bern, the capital city of Switzerland. For those who don't know, who are watching, Zurich is kind of like the finance capital, but the real capital city is Bern. Beautiful place. And I believe you studied there. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your life and what you do?
Yes, so I actually grew up in Gstaad, a ski resort in the Bernese Oberland. My father was a teacher, and then later we moved towards Bern. I studied in Bern, physics. It's called environmental physics, and it's part of the physics department. And then I went to the US for a few years, and then 19 years ago I came back to Switzerland and started here, and I still am here.
Brilliant. And that was, I think, 2007 when you came back. You've been in Boulder, Colorado, if I remember, where you're still a fellow for the climate science faculty over there, right?
I'm still sort of loosely affiliated with the National Center for Atmospheric Research, which happens to be under threat right now because the US government is attempting to dissolve it. It's a very sad story.
Yeah, it is a very sad story, and it's something that I'd like to really go into a little bit of depth in later in this interview as well. We really need to talk about, the importance of science and also the future of science, and that's one of the things we'd like to get into. We'd like to get into as well, what are our chances and what are our risks? What's the good case scenario? What's the worst case scenario? What's going to happen? And how it's going to affect us personally as well. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you agree, but I sometimes have the feeling when we talk about climate science, it's kind of talking about things that other people are affected by. And it feels a little bit like an old advert I once saw for one of those GPS systems you used to stick on the windscreen of your rental car. and it says, "You're not in traffic, you are traffic." And I believe that's a lot to do with climate change. We're all part of it, but it's difficult to know, what am I actually impacting, and also what's impacting me? How is this going to affect my private life, and is it already affecting it today? And I know that you're the guy to know that.
Yeah, I think that's true, and it's true in two ways at least, right? It's remote in a sense of most of the impacts that are most dramatic are in places that are very vulnerable, the global south, not because climate is necessarily worse there, but just because they have less resources to cope with. Adaptation is limited, governance is problematic, and so on. So it's far away. It's also typically, we think, it's far away in time. Right? It's going to be the next future generations that are going to be affected, but not us. And it's also disconnected in a causal sense that we contribute, each of us contributes a little bit by our emissions, but it's not sort of clear of how my emissions, if I happen to drive a car, are connected to the impacts, right? Because the impacts might be anywhere.
Yeah. And I know we kind of started off in a totally different direction to what I pre-warned you. I'm so sorry for doing this, but I remember one of the things I read about you, or one of the speeches I saw, we met at the Sustainable Tourism Days, also in Bern last year. And I remember you spoke about a wicked problem. Do you want to just explain for the listeners what a wicked problem is?
Yeah, I think wicked problems are sort of problems that are not well defined in a sense that they don't have a solution. It's like, I don't even know the English term. In German, we would say as Garchnogeli. So you have the sort of
like a Gordian knot.
It's a knot where if you pull somewhere, it's going to pull everywhere, and it's impossible to completely untangle it. So in a sense, for wicked problems, there is no proper solutions that has no side effects. You could just try to deal with it in better or worse ways, and you continue to adapt and figure out how you go along, right? And that makes it, of course, challenging, because you cannot just say, okay, here's the problem statement, I'm going to lay out all the solutions, I make a decision, and then I implement, and I'm done. That does not work for climate. It also doesn't work for many other societal problems, like take immigration or other things. I mean, it's always sort of an adaptive thing.
There's almost so many different things that impact it. And I know we've already interviewed a gentleman that I know you know as well, David Steinfurth, another climate scientist. And he talks a lot about what happens if you add a pendulum to a pendulum. And all of a sudden things get very chaotic. If you just have one pendulum swinging, you pretty much know what's going on. But if you have a pendulum on a pendulum, certainly as a physicist, it starts looking incredibly complicated, right?
That's true. The physical system is complicated if you go to small scales, although on the larger scale, I would kind of disagree, right? I mean, basically every ton of carbon, CO2 that you add to the atmosphere is going to warm up the atmosphere by about the same amount. So basically, if you want to stop warming, then you have to stop emitting CO2. So in a sense, on the broader scale, it's simple. Once it comes to adaptation decisions on the ground, should I build the chairlift or not in this particular location, then of course things become complicated. But I would say that the most complicated aspect is maybe not the scientific aspect, the physics side. It's the finance, it's the politics, it's the societies, it's the values that are all important, and maybe more important than the physical aspect. Right? We can quantify the physics, but quantifying politics, as we currently see in lots of places in the world, is really hard.
And it's ironic, really, if you think about some of the most successful companies of our time, if we look at Spotify, if we look at Uber, if we look at Airbnb, then they famously scaled on the strategy theory of having one key performance indicator, one metric. And so, we work a lot in the strategy area. I always like to say, 3 priorities are enough. But when we talk about things like Spotify and stuff, they just had one metric, and that was the most important thing. And the same again with Uber. There were different metrics, but that one number strategy. And what you've basically said is the one number strategy to reverse climate change is just reduce CO2. But somehow we're not doing it. And you've just mentioned some of the reasons why, and that's exactly why we're delighted to have you here to go deeper into those subjects.
I mean, we've built an environment over 100 or more years where we completely rely on energy. Because energy means growth, means GDP, means welfare, right? And energy for a very long time was equivalent to fossil fuels because that was the easiest and the simplest way to produce energy.
Yeah.
And as long as we are attached to this growth idea, which you can question because there's not going to be infinite growth in a somewhat closed system, as long as we're attached to growth and as long as we're attached to energy, we'll have to somehow break that connection, right? And that connection is going to be to produce energy in a sustainable way without relying on fossil fuels. On the broadest scale, that's going to be the thing we need to do.
And it's interesting, we've just done like a deep dive into the sailing industry. So we've been on board a lot of sustainable catamarans from very small, relatively small ones, all the way up to like super luxury catamarans from a company who even supplies to, Formula One drivers, real, if you call it super yachts. And if you do need to have a super yacht, I would definitely say they're the ones you should buy. And so what we've done from here is when the carbon industry came along, or when the carbon energy was kind of turned into something useful for us, then I think what happened was we actually had advantages. And this is something that we always forget. When it comes to climate science, it feels a little bit like religion. It's something that you should do whether you like it or not. You have to get up early on a Sunday and go to church. But I believe we need to create a future that is actually better than the past so that people embrace it. And one of the companies we interviewed, a great company called Blue Nav, they said it's a French company and they talk about ego logic. So not being ecological, but being ego logical, looking after myself. How do you feel about that? Well, I do hope you enjoyed episode 1. If you did, then please subscribe to us on YouTube so you'll get episode 2 in your feed. Or if, like me, you're a little bit impatient, then go over to patreon.com, search for the Earth Circle, and once you're registered as a patron, you'll be able to see all of these podcasts all at once. You can see the entire interview with Reto Knutti today. Do join us for the next episode. In the next episode, we're going to talk about the whole human factors side of climate change. We're going to talk about the way that we need to become more ego-logical. So not just ecological, but thinking about the benefits of climate change. Finding the path of least resistance in order to combat climate change. It's going to be a really interesting conversation because that's going to build us up for episode 3, where we'll talk about the hard facts of climate change. You can't get away without talking about degrees and numbers and tipping points, but already in this second episode, we're also going to talk about tipping points and whether Professor Reto Knutti is a defender or a supporter of the tipping point philosophy. I think you'll be very interested to hear what he has to say about that.